Hey everybody, I am Ethan Fixell. I am Kerrang's US Director, and we're here at Kerrang's US office in Brooklyn, New York. Welcome to In Conversation with Claudio Sanchez of COHEED and CAMBRIA. Yeah. Thank you so much, Claudio, for coming today.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. This is sort of like Inside the Actors Studio with James Lipton, except, you know, with a musician and not as classy, okay? So we're going to talk a little bit about your life, about your career. Congrats, first of all, on the new album.
Oh, thank you.
Unheavenly Creatures is awesome. So I would love a round of applause for Unheavenly Creatures, please. Yeah. You also have an amazing US tour coming up that we'll talk about, right? But I wanted to start by saying this. I've been listening to COHEED since 2002, since Second Stage, and I'm sure a lot of fans here have too, right? I have to admit, I still have no idea what's going on in the Amory Wars.
Oh, that's totally fine.
Okay, I'm not alone.
No.
Because I feel like my mom when she listens to Slayer lyrics and she's like, what are they saying? I don't... Can you make an Amory Wars for Dummies at some point? Like a redux?
Possibly. Yeah, sure.
I would love that.
You know, we're yeah.
Okay. What percentage of fans of COHEED and CAMBRIA would you say are in it primarily for the music, in it primarily for the comic, or both?
It's tough to say. Maybe 50-50. I'm not sure.
Okay.
To be completely honest, what do you guys think?
Yeah. Music?
Music? Both? Okay.
It's a mix.
Yeah.
What about the band? I was curious if the band is into the comic book side as much as you are, or are they more into the music?
Yeah, probably more so into the music. I mean, you know, in the past, you know, they weren't as invested in it as you know, I am, but you know, that's also goes with me being sort of the lyricist and some of the content, you know, being married to the books. But you know, as the band progressed, you know, everyone sort of kind of got involved and read it, and certainly with Unheavenly Creatures has participated in you know, the sonic version of what's in that story. So yeah, I mean, I think you know, they grew to appreciate it and embrace it as time moved on.
That's awesome. That's good to hear. As you know, we have many of your fans here today in the office. Many of them have submitted questions beforehand, and so I'm going to, you know, inject some of their questions throughout this conversation. I hope that's cool.
Yeah.
But I wanted to start by going back in history, right, and start with Shibudi, even back before, yeah, way back. Scandalous. As most people here know, you know, COHEED, which was Shibudi, formed in Rockland County, New York in 1995. And, you know, obviously on the other side of Manhattan, where I'm from, Long Island, there was a lot of, there's a great hardcore scene going on, right? You know, Glassjaw, Vision of Disorder, and then later you had, you know, Taking Back Sunday, Brand New, all these other bands that came up. What was going on in Rockland County when Shibudi was coming up? What was the scene like?
You know, well, for me, you know, Shibudi really didn't spawn in Nyack. I mean, sort of did, but it was like it was this hybrid between Rockland County and Woodstock, New York. Okay. And so there were these two scenes that were kind of, you know, visiting each other up and down the thruway. And so, you know, when I decided to start a band, it just happened to be with, you know, a drummer from upstate New York, and the bass player was sort of interchangeable. It was at one point it was somebody in Rockland, and then the next minute it's someone in Woodstock. So, but for the most part, you know, it was more of a punk-oriented scene, and for us, we were a bit of, I think, the odd man out, because, you know, I didn't have a musical identity, you know, being sort of the front man of this project. It was something that, you know, I was trying to figure out. You know, I came from all sorts of, you know, I had a lot of tastes in music. I didn't want one taste to sort of define my personality and my person, you know, like it just didn't make sense to me. But I just didn't know what that equaled in terms of output. Like who am I? And I think that's what Shibudi really was. It was just confusing. You know, it was somebody trying to figure out who they were. And it wasn't until COHEED was sort of born that we kind of understood, kind of had more of an idea, or at least I did, as to who I wanted to be fronting a band.
And those influences that were going into Shibudi and what would become COHEED at that time were what? Like, what kind of stuff were you listening to at the time?
I mean, you know, it was like jazz, funk, rap, metal. You know, it was really like all over the place. Like I have a collection of demo tapes, you know, 4-track demo tapes, and it's like, I mean, there's like 50, 60, maybe close to 100 songs. I mean, there's a lot of songs, and they're just all over the place. Like somewhere the drummer is rapping on them, somewhere it's like, clearly like I used to think of myself as a songwriter in multiple personalities, and each personality had a type of music that it created. So there was Papa Porpoise, there was Mr. M, Professor Plum, and Camille. Wow. And they all, seriously, and they all had like, and I think to this day they still exist in my mind, because when you listen to Coheed, there are songs that kind of sit in a certain cabinet of music, when you think of a song like, I don't know, Lucky Stars against True Ugly, or or one of the more progressive things. I mean, they all had, those were just my ways of exercising a type of thing that I wanted to do, creating these weird personas in my mind and then writing within them.
That's cool. And during that period, were you also interested in comic books the way that you are now today?
Yes, absolutely. When I started creating the idea of Coheed before, while we were still Shibudi, I worked in a pet store. Okay. And on my breaks, I would visit a comic shop across the street. And I'd always liked comics. I mean, I had a much bigger collection when I was a kid. Nowadays, it's like really more of like these CGC books of like key moments in certain characters, like arcs and things like that. But for the most part, like when I was in this pet store working on this stuff and spending my time at the comic shop on the off time, I started to develop this idea of the Amory Wars. I spent my time really just kind of cleaning fish tanks. And that's why the keywork is blue. I took the name keywork from the guys that's basically the beam of energy that binds all the planets together, from the guys that own the shop. Oh, there was a fella in there that actually, I was talking to him one time about the story that I was concocting, and he had said, he's like, all I want you to do is make me the villain. And I was like, okay. And so I did. His name was William Ryan, but he became Wilhelm Ryan in the comic.
Interesting.
So,
did you envision yourself becoming a comic book author as well?
Yes and no. I mean, I didn't really know what I was doing when I wrote Second Stage. I just wanted to do it. I figured, here I am trying to be in a rock band. Why don't I try to go do this other thing as well? I just wanted to do it. So I didn't really think of myself as anything but somebody trying, and that was it,
When you recorded Second Stage Turbine Blade, it came out in 2002, right? And that was a lot of people, that was their first introduction to the band. How did you envision the band going from there? I mean, were you trying to do anything in particular with the band, or were you just enjoying playing and seeing where it went?
I definitely wanted the comic book counterpart to happen. I think at that stage, it was a little early. See, it's funny, when we put out Second Stage, it was really a series, if I'm remembering this correctly, it was really a series of demos that we were shopping to a label called Equal Vision in Hudson, New York. And when we were finished with those demos, they really liked it. And we're like, that's the record. So, here we are in this mind frame that these are demos, when all along they were the record. So it was like, that was it.
Wow.
So we were just really just four guys, really just kind of getting to know each other through the music that we were creating. And so once that came out, then it was like, okay, well now I got to figure out this other component. So in around 2004, we released our first comic book, and it was exclusive on the Warped Tour that we were on at that time.
Oh, wow.
So the only way to get it was there. But yeah, it was just four guys having fun, trying to do, crazy stuff, and basically trying to be like, our version of the Beatles, or when you were younger, for us, like being musicians, we always really enjoyed watching, like, I don't know, Red Hot Chili Peppers make Blood Sugar Sex Magic. There was like this DVD at the time. It was like this band in a house and making a record and just doing really off the, bizarro things. And then of course, obviously the Beatles and like, Sgt. Pepper and all that stuff. I mean, that's what we wanted to do. And we made that record demoed that record. That's what we thought, in a guy's bedroom in New Jersey. And remember one instance, our version of what I was just talking about is that in Time Consumer, there's a grandfather clock that's ringing, and it happened to be the grandfather clock in this fella's living room. And we were so excited about the sound of this clock. We were like, we have to record this clock. So it was like us exploring sound and at the best we could, with what time we had in this little studio. So.
Well, as the saying goes, all great music is recorded in some guy in New Jersey's bedroom.
Right on. Yeah.
That's how it works usually. And when you were touring for the Second Stage era in like 2002, 2003, what were the types of bands that you were going out with, and who were you playing with at that time?
We were playing with, if I remember, our first tour was with a band called Breaking Pangea.
Sure. Philly.
Yeah, right on. Breaking Pangea we were out with. I'm so drawing a blank. Shai Hulud.
Oh, cool.
From Autumn to Ashes, I believe. I think we did a couple of like one-offs with My Chem. Like that sort of stuff.
It's interesting because with the exception of My Chem, Gerard is very much into comics and very much in that world. The rest of those bands, and from what I remember, the bands were very like straightforward hardcore or post-hardcore bands that didn't have as many progressive tendencies as you guys did. Did you feel like you were kind of like the odd duck in that world, or did you feel like you fit in?
Like I said, earlier, even like from that beginning stages with Shibudi, we were always the oddity when it came to the scene that we were sort of partnering with. To a degree, yeah. There were some tendencies that we had that were relatable to the other bands that we were playing with, but for the most part, the guy with the high voice right off the bat is that's sometimes the thing that people don't like about our band. You know what I mean?
Sure. So, it's certainly memorable. You
yeah.
know? And then, you came out in 2003 with In Keeping Secrets of Silent Earth 3. What was it like for you when Favor House Atlantic broke? Because that, I feel like, was a much more mainstream introduction, and the band was suddenly kind of thrust forward. Everybody kind of took notice. What was that era like?
It was cool. I mean, when Second Stage came out, we started to get major label interest, and at the time, I think we had asked Equal Vision what they thought about it. And I think ultimately we just kind of felt like it wasn't the right time to like make that sort of move. Mm-hmm. And then when In Keeping came out and that song, then it was sort of like, well, maybe now is the time to make that next step. I mean, it was really kind of exciting. It's the era when I met my wife, who's a partner in a lot of the things that I do. Right. I don't know. It was a lot of fun. I mean, it was really kind of an unbelievable moment, to be, like I said, this oddity where, about 2 years before that, I was working in a pet store. I was trying to get a degree in audio engineering because, now it was time for a plan B. Mm-hmm. Got a, internship in the city, and the minute I got that internship, it was like time to get in a van and promote a record that we didn't know was going to do anything. And that was Second Stage, but
it's cool because that was when the dream became a possibility.
Yeah, absolutely.
For reality. The video for A Favor House Atlantic also is interesting to me because some of you guys know that the video is like set in a bar and you guys are kind of doing wacky hijinks, but it has nothing to do with Amory Wars, nothing to do with the comic, nothing to do with the lyrics. What was the decision to do that, and why the dissonance between the comic and that?
I think I had a hand in writing that treatment, okay. And at the time it was like, like I said, the band wasn't really behind the Amory Wars so much, and That said, we did actually try to do an animated video for what I believe might have been that song.
Yeah, there is an animated video.
Oh,
for that.
Yeah. So
I know better than you.
Yeah.
Claudio.
So and we were, the aesthetic I wasn't too happy with. So I just, I didn't feel like it was the right time to really start introducing the Amory Wars in a live sort of action kind of or animated sort of situation. Partnering with the band. I also just kind of wanted to do something fun. I wanted to showcase the personalities of the band. I'm not the most fun member of COHEED and Cambria. Let's just put that out there. But the other guys are hilarious. They're like really like, it's like Seinfeld. It's like Seinfeld to me is like not the funniest character of the show. It's really the cast. And so I really wanted to kind of, it's easy to see me as the guy in the hair, and it's like, oh, that guy's a weirdo, But I wanted to really showcase the personalities of the other members. So I thought doing something like that would have done that nicely.
That's interesting. So you had this, this comic theme going through all the music and the lyrics, but it wasn't the only focal point at that point. You're sort of showing other parts. Do you feel like the industry in general was sort of too reductive in marketing Coheed and sort of like, here's an emo band or whatever they would call you, which had really nothing to do with what you were doing at that time?
I mean, I just don't. I think they just kind of let us do what we did, But I don't know if they necessarily understood what we were doing. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
Am I answering your question?
I think so. Yeah.
I just feel like we if I can look forward and I think about like our position with all the labels that we bounced around with, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I'm not answering your question.
Well, I mean, I think you're saying what I was saying to some extent, that it was just sort of like, I think there's two ways to appreciate Coheed, right? There's the surface level, and then if you want to dive deeper, you can. And I think that at that point, the world was not ready to dive deeper, is sort of what you're saying.
True.
But then, in 2005 and then later 2007, you had the Good Apollo 1 and 2 albums. And Volume 1 was your first release on a major label, right?
Yes.
Last album with Josh Eppard for a little while. And the band is more popular than it's ever been before for that Volume 1 album. Do you recall this period as like an intense and exciting time for the band? What are your memories from that period?
Absolutely. Well, Josh was on that record.
Right.
Yeah.
And that was the last
that was the last one.
Yep.
Okay. So, yes, that time was very exciting. We have this big machine behind us. We did a pretty big tour in support of that record with Avenged Sevenfold. It was like this.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was very exciting. That was the first record where we actually released a graphic novel companion at the same time with the album. So like the vision was starting to come alive. But with all that also came the fall of the band, I think. With chemical dependencies kind of making their way into the formula and things like that. So.
Yeah, and I'd like to, we'll touch upon that later. No,
I happen to be more of the pessimist of the band as well.
No. I mean, that's all part of the history, right? And I think what makes the band interesting is how it's persevered through all of these different ups and downs, and members coming in and out. But ultimately, the core has really remained true. And we can get more into that in a bit. But I think coming back to Good Apollo 1, the biggest single from that record, obviously, "Welcome Home." Yeah. And one of the first question that we have from the audience is actually from an employee of Kerrang.
Oh, right on.
Kat, our editorial producer. She is obsessed with that song. She's over there. Say hi, Kat. There
hi,
she
Kat.
is. She wanted to know if because of the heavy lyrics, the heavy riffs, it's got heavy video imagery. It's in Rock Band, the video game. Did you feel like Welcome Home endeared you more to metalheads than ever before when it came out? That's her question.
Yeah, probably. I mean, when I was writing the song, and now I'm going to ruin it for you, Kat. I was writing that song in my boxers in my living room. I was living with my parents at the time, and this was like two-family house.
Well, that's pretty metal.
Yeah. So I'm in my living room. I'm in my boxers. I'm in this small kitchen, and I'm working out the riff. And as I finish the riff, and I'm like, wow, I'm like really excited, and I'm thinking it sounds like Tool. I'm like, man, I think I just wrote this Tool song. And my mom, and I'm like, so I like start rocking, and then my mom walks in, and I'm like, man, maybe now is the time. I gotta get out of here.
That's interesting.
But yeah, I mean, I think so for sure. I mean, I was angry when I wrote that record at my wife, who at the time wasn't my wife, and we had this separation, and I think the lyrics are, they definitely wear my emotions of the time. But I'm very proud of that song. I do very much like it a lot. I like the big orchestration that kind of follows it. I mean, with that major label came money and came, the chance to really make a big production, as we've always wanted to do, going back to those like Beatles albums and that Chili Peppers DVD that we would all rock so frequently.
I love the image of that big boisterous song with the major label money being written by a dude in his boxers at home.
That's funny.
On Good Apollo 2 in 2007, you actually worked with Taylor Hawkins of Foo Fighters. He was the studio drummer for that record. Tell us, what was that like working with him?
I mean, that was great. I mean, it was unfortunate because at the time, we lost Josh, and Josh was a big piece of what COHEED does, and that was very unfortunate. And so at the time, just to give you a little story, like, we got Chris Penny of Dillinger Escape Plan to come on in, but due to contractual obligations, he couldn't perform on the record. And Nick Raskulinecz, the producer of the album, suggested Taylor Hawkins, and which was really great because Taylor, to be honest, like when I hear Taylor's the way he sort of delivers, it kind of reminded me of Josh. I mean, he was a lot of fun. He made the experience very easy and welcoming for us. I mean, it's tough. There's a band that fell apart. I mean, that's why the record's called No World for Tomorrows, because we thought, that it was over, Travis and I. So so Taylor really kind of helped us, and a lot of great memories of working on that, especially that, like, I remember working on, I'm just going to tell you stories. I don't care.
That's what we're here for.
But, one of my favorite, I don't have a whole lot of rock moments in my career because, like I said earlier, I go to bed at 7 o'clock and wake up at 3 a.m. But everyone else is partying while I'm asleep. But anyway, while we're making the record, we were doing No World, and Chad Smith of the Chili Peppers happened to be there. He was friends with Taylor, and we were just kind of going over like the parts for No World, and Taylor was doing some sort of variation, but again, going back to Josh, it's like I wanted the kick of the song to be very steady. I wanted it to feel like Josh was playing it, because Josh does this thing. Josh doesn't play with double kick. It's single foot, and you can really feel the anxiety behind one foot, like just pounding away. And I remember like we were kind of debating it. And I think Chad Smith then was like, yeah, you should do it on the kick. And it was just like, wow, this is crazy. This is, this is like, so that was a cool little rock moment. Sorry if I bored you.
No, I think that's what we're here for. Like I said, I mean, that's amazing. And that time, you mentioned that the band was kind of falling apart at that time. So what set the scene there? Like, I mean, what were you kind of going through internally when that was happening?
Well, I mean, it was right before No World. So, again, it was, right about the time after the Avenged tour, chemical dependency kind of makes its way in. And, we basically kind of lost half the band to drugs, and which is, I mean, this isn't really, that side of the story really isn't mine to tell. But I just know from my side, it was like unfortunate because I didn't really want to fall victim to the rock and roll cliche. I always tried to kind of avoid it. But it happens. Mistakes are made. So it was unfortunate. But Travis and I have been friends since we were 13. I mean, I think I started learning how to play music with Travis, and we just figured out a way to kind of pick up the pieces and try to make this still be a thing.
Sure.
And I think that's a great part of the story is like two kids, now adults, trying to figure out how to keep it going.
And Josh would eventually make his way back into the band.
Yes, he did.
Unfortunately, Mike never came back into the band.
Well, he did.
Oh, he did.
Yeah, he was. Well, yeah, he was in the band up until yeah. It's a. I'll save it for the book.
Okay. From what I understand, he was gone after Year of the Black Rainbow, right? After like 2011.
There's a couple of separations, but yes,
okay.
After Year of the Black Rainbow,
Well,
Mike leaves.
the question is, have you had any contact with him since his last departure?
I have not. No.
Yeah. Okay. That's a bummer. That sucks.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on to happier times.
Okay.
As I mentioned, Year of the Black Rainbow is 2010, and that's when the Amory Wars had actually. The Amory Wars had come out before that, but the Year of the Black Rainbow graphic novel had come out.
Well, actually, this was a prose novel, so no pictures, just words.
The Year of the Black Rainbow.
Yeah.
Correct. Right.
Yes.
So not a graphic novel.
Yeah, not a graphic
Oh
novel.
Jesus! See, this is where I can't follow the Amory Wars.
Yeah, man, you can't. I get it.
I thought I was a band geek, but I'm not. I have not read that. But either way, this is a 350 page plus book, right? Did that for you feel like the next level of authorship? Did you have a sense of accomplishment when that came out that was very different from the comic books?
Absolutely. I mean, I definitely had some hand holding with Peter David, my co-author, because I couldn't take that task alone, being both working on the record at the same time. I had to kind of delegate some duties and so writing that back and forth with him, I mean, it was it was interesting because it was definitely a different thing. When you're writing for a comic book, honestly, I mean, you're really writing for an artist to sort of direct your script, and to then have to, writing a prose piece, you are really writing to the audience more so, I think. I mean, that's how I sort of see it. I mean, but yeah. I definitely felt a sense of accomplishment, and honestly, we've been trying to continue the rest of the stories in adapted sort of prose pieces as well. So.
And how long were you planning that book? I mean, that seems like it must have taken a long time to kind of figure out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All of the books, even the comics. I mean, they take a while. Especially since you have like this canon that's sort of sitting there. You need to figure out ways to like sort of reverse engineer things and tie things up. My wife and I right now are actually plotting No World for Tomorrow, which is sort of the end of the COHEED and Cambria sort of saga. Of course, there are other stories that sort of around it, but for the most part, I mean, what we thought was already done is not. As we go back into the work and we find things like in Year of the Black Rainbow that we're like, we never tied that up. We need to figure that out. There's a lot of things we got to tie up. So but
what's the number one thing that's like killing you that you want to tie up?
Oh man, I can't tell you because
it's a secret.
I can't.
Okay. All right. Well,
but it's so exciting. Everyone is going to be stoked.
Okay. Fair enough. Getting back to the music for a bit, right? I want to jump ahead to 2012, 2013, the Aftermans. The Aftermans, can I say? The Aftermen, because there's 2 albums. And in that whole cycle, you actually opened for a very big band in 2012, Iron Maiden.
Oh, yes.
And Daniel, one of our fans here today, has a question, because Iron Maiden can, opening for them can be a notoriously tough gig. I mean, a big act to kind of open for. Last time they were in the United States, it was Ghost that was opening for them. So Daniel wants to know, how were the audiences at those shows, at the Iron Maiden shows in general, and have you ever played for a tougher crowd than that?
I think tougher than Iron Maiden would be Slipknot.
Ooh.
But I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, only in certain cities, though. I mean, for the most part, we do pretty well, like as a support act. I mean, with Iron Maiden, I think there was a lot of similarities. So I don't think it was as tough. But yeah, definitely Slipknot. Like like I said, in select cities, it was a little rough. But for the most part, I mean, I think we were well received and accepted.
How many shows did you do with Iron Maiden, and how many shows did you do with Slipknot?
Well, I don't.
I mean, roughly.
Yeah, probably about a month's worth.
Right. And so on the Maiden tour, there's this theatrical level that kind of works. But actually, going to Slipknot, it's a different type of theatrics, right? It's like this intensity, this unbridled intensity. So what were some of the? What was it like when you were playing on stage? If that was difficult, what was difficult about it? Like when you were on stage
with either band?
Yeah, with Slipknot in particular.
Oh, well, Slipknot, I think it was, when audience members don't really, when they're really verbal about how, how much they don't like you. It's, that can be kind of discouraging, but for the most part, you just close your eyes.
Right.
That's why I have the hair. Like, most of the time I don't see it. I hear about it afterwards.
That's funny. And I think on the flip side, playing before a band like Slipknot, you actually pick up fans that you wouldn't have necessarily picked up otherwise.
Absolutely.
So it's a huge opportunity for sure.
For sure. That's why we do it. That's why I wish we could get more sort of support gigs, is because I think it is important to the growth of the band. But we're a strange band, so it's like so. So we'll see.
Is there a band, a dream band that you would love to open for that you've never opened for before?
You know, I don't know. I mean, I'd like to open for the Foo Fighters. I think
We'd go to that tour.
yeah, like, I mean, we've had, like I said, working with Taylor, at that time when we were doing No World for Tomorrow, the Foo Fighters were actually mixing right next door in the same studio. So there are moments where, Travis and I would be outside talking to Dave, and it was just like, wow, this is, I remember one time we went and saw Heaven and Hell while we were making that record, right? So we went on Dave's bus, and we're like running around the venue chasing Dave Grohl. Like Travis and I, we're like, is this really like happening? Like, so it's just like, I just had so much fun experiencing that time with in that circle.
Right.
So I guess I'd like to experience it again. I don't know.
That's awesome. Has there been any talk ever?
No.
Okay. I have another question. This one's from Jonathan. And he wants to know that, the fans of Coheed and Cambria are normally categorized as a cult following. Hey, cult. And they would do anything to support you guys. Does that add extra pressure when recording or performing? Do you feel that extra pressure from how much these fans love you?
I don't feel pressure. I mean, it's definitely something we think about, certainly when we were making Unheavenly Creatures.
Yep.
For me, when I was writing a lot of material, I wanted to create moments where there was a sense of participation. And, whether it be in the chanting or some sort of percussive sort of situation, whatever, just creating ways to make us all feel involved. But no pressure, nothing negative, I think I was pretty confident with this material that I thought you guys were going to like it. So
I think we like it. Do you feel like the fans have in some ways influenced you?
Sure, for sure.
Yeah.
There's things I think about in the while creating things, for sure.
Can you dive into any of that? Is there any ways in which they've sort of like asked for things and you've decided, yeah, you know what, let's do that, or the ways that they react to certain things?
Absolutely. When I think of Reddit, or for example, the interview Chandra did with you guys, the things that she, didn't think about before when we were considering No World for Tomorrow. Things get brought up, the questions are asked, and they're great, and we listen and we figure out ways to answer them, and we want people to be happy with what we do.
Well, you just interacted with another fan because that last question was from Michael.
Oh, right.
So there you go. I want to move forward next to 2015, Color Before the Sun. And this is a really interesting period for me. I saw one fan go like, yeah, that's my album. That's his album. It's an interesting album because, it's your first non-concept album, right? Not based on the Amory Wars. It comes a year after your son was born, Atlas, right? And, as a fellow dad, I know how much that changes your life, right? So can you maybe talk about the connection between the musical decision that you made and this massive life event? I'm sure that they're related in terms of like having a kid.
For sure. That's what the title is a play on. Basically, The Color Before the Sun is basically a play on the idea of the feelings before birth. Oh. And my wife and I, we experienced a lot of interesting things before Atlas was born, like our country home. Mm-hmm. We were actually living in the city at the time, but we were renting out our country home to sort of experience life here. And while we were living in the city, the renters actually turned our house into like a $300,000 a month grow house, destroyed it.
Whoa.
So right as we're like trying to figure out, the birth of our son, we have this big financial burden on our hands where, insurance thinks that we were involved and all of these things. So, but I found that, I wake up early in the morning. I walked at the time we were living in Park Slope, and I was walking around Prospect Park, and the color coming up over the park just immediately made me think of that. And, and yeah, I mean, I have a hard time with the touring sort of aspect of what we do. It's hard I'm a homebody, I think, at the core of who I am. I really don't like traveling. I think if somebody had told me that there was the counterpart to being in a rock band was leaving home, I for some reason that didn't make a whole lot. Like I didn't realize that was a thing. So I'm not the easiest person to tour with because I'm always like a ticking time bomb weirdo, like, so my apologies to my companions. That's what The Color Before the Sun is, basically. It's just all of those emotions about now, how am I going to navigate life with a child? Like now I have to leave home. And I mean, the song Atlas, I wrote that before he was born. I knew that it just wasn't going to be easy.
That's interesting that you wrote that before he was born.
Yeah.
How did it feel to write such a personal album that was detached from the comic storyline? That was the first time you've done that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for the most part, all the Coheed records are very much based on my real life. I just, when I created the Amory Wars, I created it as like this facade. I had a hard time, I'm an introvert, so it's hard for me to like really like put myself out there. And then, being a front man of a band, again, if somebody just warned me about like all of these like positions, like, so that's why I created the science fiction concept, is to basically sing about myself, but basically blame it on a bunch of characters, So I'd always been kind of doing it. But then, when doing The Color Before the Sun, it was like, well, here I am. I'm going to, I'm going to just put the concept aside and let my life be the concept. Instead of writing what appears to be science fiction, I'm going to write a biography.
Is that something that you would feel comfortable doing again?
Oh, absolutely. Mm-hmm. But, I think now, I when I did that, it definitely exercised a demon, but I really did miss writing within the Amory Wars, because I do like, my favorite part about that is I get to do both things. I get to sing about songs that reflect me personally, but I get to really sort of transform them into these very like elaborate and wonderful pieces of fiction. And so I kind of missed that. I missed exercising that portion of my creativity.
That's really interesting, because you're really touching upon the dichotomy that is Claudio. You have this kind of meek, gentle, like very kind soul, I assume, it seems like.
There's a horrible monster inside.
But there's rage. But in all seriousness, when you get on stage, I mean, you're a fucking beast. You can just, there's a lot of intensity there, and it's interesting how you express yourself through the comic storyline and through the music in that way, to kind of allow that to exist in both worlds. And I don't know if that's something you've thought about consciously, but it seems like you're aware of it.
Yeah, like, well, I like to, not to be a comic book geek about it, but it's like Superman. That's exactly how it feels to me. Like, right. When I'm on stage, I get to, maybe it's the hair, so I don't really know that what my reality is. But for the most part, it's, it's like when I was younger, I think everybody in the band did this, and probably everybody here, when you're listening to something that really touches you emotionally, you close the door and you rock out and you just feel like you're somewhere else. Mm-hmm. That's how it feels like to me on stage. Like, it's just a glorified version of being in my room, closing the door, and just rocking the fuck out.
You can say fuck, it's Kerrang.
Oh, yeah. I didn't know that. Okay, yeah. Awesome.
I said fuck
More
before.
Fucks are going to happen.
Yeah. That brings us to Unheavenly Creatures, right? So the most recent album, right? You returned to the Amory Wars. What was the driving force, to return to that storyline?
Well, I'd always known I was going to do that.
Okay.
Like I said, I was going to exercise my demons with Color Before the Sun. I thought it was appropriate. Here it is. My son's being born. Let me sort of tribute that, untouched. But as far as like returning to the Amory Wars in terms of the story, I had a much different idea of what that was going to be before The Color Before the Sun. Okay. I was going to be this sort of straight, direct return to the Cyrus Amory character from the Afterman, and we were going to go forward. But as time drew on, I started to conceptualize this much bigger sort of idea. And that's where the Unheavenly Creatures came into play, and their son Vaxis. Of course, it's going to somewhat mirror my emotions as a dad now with my son in the world. Mm-hmm. But it's a much bigger, more interesting story than what I had before the color. So
Interesting. And you talk about how your personal life influenced Unheavenly Creatures. Tyler is here tonight. He has a question. What was the most difficult or emotional topic or theme that you took from your personal life and brought to life through song or the comics?
That record.
I think he's asking in general.
In general?
Yeah.
I would probably think, it'd probably be like a song. I mean, there's a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
I think Welcome Home is certainly one because, that's Young Love, Broken.
Yeah.
Young Love is another song. I mean, that song I wrote about my house that got completely destroyed. I mean, a lot of life happened in there, and it was really hard to kind of separate myself from that sort of just, this place that no longer was the place that we had loved. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of moments. I think Pearl of the Stars is another. I hope I'm answering the question.
Yeah, you just named 3.
Oh, right on.
That was good.
I win.
On the coming back to Unheavenly Creatures, this is the first. I think it's the first record that you haven't had a producer on, that you produced yourself.
Yes.
Okay. So Dallas, who's here tonight as well, wants to know what were some of the pros and cons of not working with a producer on this one.
I don't know. The pros are, we really got to be the creative force. Mm-hmm. It's nice to have a producer in the mix. I think one of my favorite production, I think to date. Of course, I think they all have their strong points, but this time I think we wanted us to be the only opinion. Mm-hmm. I think we've been making records for a long time. We really wanted to just kind of try our hand at it. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of creative. Maybe in the credits it says that I write the songs, but there are, everybody is very much a creative contributor to what we do, and is very talented. Mm-hmm. So it's like, I think us as a committee, as a COHEED and CAMBRIA roundtable, I think we can figure this out. And Chris Bittner, who is the engineer on that record, has engineered most of our albums, and we've had a really great relationship with. So, I think that, the pro is, I'd rather have, sometimes it's a little hard, and this is no discredit to any producer that we worked with, but, it's not their full time. Mm-hmm. COHEED is like, this is our full time. It's hard to inject somebody's part time into our full time, if that makes any sense.
This is your baby.
Yeah.
Versus them kind of coming and helping out.
Yeah. When I have to, when I start to, I feel silly when I'm expressing to somebody the conceptual side of a song and why and how do we get there, and they're just like, fuck you. They don't say that to me, but
I understand. Yeah. And then, you've got this album that's amazing, and you're going to go support it on tour, which I'm very excited about. Big tour in the U.S. throughout all of February. I want to know what fans can expect on this run. Is there anything different from the previous tours? What should we look out for?
We're going to change the set around a bit. This tour is some markets we haven't played it in a minute, so the production might be a little lighter than what we had done on, say, the Taking Back run. Mm-hmm. But the set list is going to switch up a little bit. This is the calm before the storm. I don't think this is like the Unheavenly Creatures support.
Okay, what does that mean?
I can't tell you yet. You gotta wait.
A lot of secrets with promises and things that we want revealed.
Cliffhangers, baby.
Cliffhangers. One thing that I'm hoping you'll reveal is the answer to this question. Justin wants to know how you take care of your voice on tour.
Oh, okay. A lot of water.
Okay.
I can't. I'm like a gremlin. I can't. Well, reverse gremlin, I guess, because I can have a lot of water, but I can't eat after a certain time. So.
What happens? You grow fur?
Well, yeah, more fur. But you should see down here.
Wow. No. The F-bomb you dropped earlier doesn't look so bad anymore.
No.
Kerrang's headline tomorrow. I think we know what we're writing about tomorrow.
Yeah, right on. what was I saying? I don't remember.
Talking about fur. No, you're talking about taking care of your voice.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And no, I actually not suffer, but I have acid reflux. So, if I lay down on like a messed up stomach, the acid spits up into my esophagus, and the next day I have a hard time talking, and then it's like an uphill battle.
That sucks.
But for the most part, that's it. That's about it.
When you're on tour, what do you do these days, on your days off?
I like to either a couple of things. I like to find comic shops or vintage toy stores.
Wow.
Travis has sort of become my companion in that find, because we like to buy our kids are sort of into older things.
Okay.
Because of us. I think because of our influence. So we try to find them old like Star Wars toys or Thundercats. Thundercats happens to be Travis's son's new thing, so that'll be part of the search on this run. My son loves Thomas the engine. Oh my God, is he obsessed with Thomas? I mean, now I'm like searching Japanese like import Thomases.
Wow.
He's just got, it's like, wow.
He's a Thomas connoisseur.
Oh, he sure is.
Okay.
But, and I also really like to eat Indian food. Sometimes on a day off, I'll try to find an Indian spot and eat. And I like to eat alone. Whenever everybody wants to go out to eat together, I have a hard time with that. I'm like, I don't want anybody hearing our conversations or
You had an applause break for eating alone, so someone they support that. And what music are you listening to on the road on your days off? Melissa wants to know.
I'm not listening to anything at the moment, but I was having this conversation earlier. I think my favorite contemporary artist is Bon Iver.
Sure.
I find myself listening to that. If I need to listen to something, that becomes it.
Bon Iver and a acoustic Coheed tour?
I wish, but yeah, sure.
Okay. Let's wrap up. We only have a couple more minutes.
Got it.
So let's wrap up with talking about the future. Okay. I have to ask, this is the number one question about the future. People were really freaked out when you played the prank about your hair. So, in the future, will you ever cut your hair?
I might. I might. I don't, it was like such a silly thing, and to see the sort of attention that it got, I had to take it one step further. And
well, the reveal in St. Louis was breathtaking.
I know.
That whole thing was great. When the hat comes off and the mane comes out, that was pretty great. So you might cut it. You never know.
Yeah, maybe one day. Maybe not while Coheed's alive,
Okay.
but when it's over, then I'll cut
the
it.
hair is the source of power for Coheed.
It might be. Who knows?
Just a couple more questions about the future. You've done music. You've done comics. Joanne wants to know, what artistic medium would you like to get into next?
I definitely like toys. I would like to branch out into, some sort of toy situation. I mean, we've done vinyl toys for a comic that is unrelated to the Amory Wars, but something related to the Amory Wars. And we're in the process of kind of doing something at the moment. So I'm hoping that'll see the light of day soon.
No more info there?
Right at the moment, we're working with NECA. So we're prototyping, I'm going to just say it, we're prototyping a COHEED and CAMBRIA. So
that's awesome.
But yeah, and Randy at NECA has been amazing, really super nice guy, and I'm really excited every time. I've just seen like before the paints. We're still working on the Canon a little bit, but it's just I'm really excited. Like, it's hard for me to pull the trigger, like, because I'm like, oh man, this is it.
Yeah.
But I also want to see, I'd love to see the story get adapted into some sort of animation or a show or whatever. Like, I'm open.
Mark wants to know when we can expect to see a piece of your work on Broadway. Will there be a Broadway show for COHEED and CAMBRIA?
It's funny. I partnered up with a playwright a few years back, and at the time I couldn't really say much about it. but it actually the project actually fell apart. But I wrote the first act to a musical adaptation of a Victorian novel called The Picture of Dorian Gray.
Sure.
I was actually just looking at the tracks this morning because I was just sort of compiling all the songs that never really made it to record. Not like just the demos that you hear on some of but songs that never made it. And I saw the first act and I put that in a file. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. It was different, but I don't think it's ever going to make it. So maybe one day you guys would come on the bus and I'll play it for you.
Awesome. That would be great. Well, we really appreciate you spending the time with us today.
Oh, you got it.
Can we get a round of applause for Claudio, everybody?
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much. And I hope everyone out here buys Unheavenly Creatures. If you haven't already, see you guys on tour in February.
Awesome.
Anything else you want to tell the fans before we go?
Thanks for coming.
Cool.
I didn't know what to expect.
Thank you guys so much for coming. We appreciate it.